Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Show Up with Christine Chang podcast. I'm Christine Chang, and I'm so excited to have Eben Britton on the podcast today. He is an ex-NFL athlete turned yogi. He teaches, he's an author, he's a podcast host, and he hosts wellness retreats called Heal and Flow. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me, Christine.
The last time I saw you, you almost killed me in your yoga class, your heated yoga class.
Yeah, it's a beast.
I've taken a lot of heated yoga classes. Yours was one of the hardest.
Really?
I've ever experienced.
Yeah.
Do you turn up the humidity in that class?
It's always just set at a certain percentage. I think she has it at 50%, the studio owner.
For all classes?
Yeah, all the classes.
Okay, because...
And it's about 105.
I didn't tell you, but I was in such a fucking daze after your class. I forgot my yoga mat there.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, and I don't live that close. I'm in Marina Del Rey, right? Like it's kind of a trek.
That's a haul.
So I was like, okay, when I go get it back, I should just take class again because I'm driving that way. Mm-hmm. And you happen to be out of town, and so it was a sub. She was so much nicer than you.
Really?
Yes.
Oh my God.
I think it was Vicky or Victoria. She was Asian and
Vicky.
Vicky.
Yeah.
Smile on her face. She opened the door a lot. I mean, it was perfect for that day. I was like, this is good for me right now.
I love that. So that was a Thursday night?
It was a Thursday night, that I went. But
okay.
I didn't give you a heads up that I was coming, but it was perfect for me.
I love that you went back.
Yeah. Why? To get my yoga mat.
I understand.
All right. So I met you at one of your workshop retreats called Heal and Flow.
Yep.
And after that, I told my husband, I said, I think that Eben is a really great example of a balanced, modern, masculine man. And he said, what does that mean? And for me, I'm not the best with descriptive words. I just say I'm like, it's just the energy. Like you'll know when you meet him. However, you majored in English, so I think you'll be able to probably articulate this better than me. But I think this is an important conversation to have in today's age.
It really is.
What did masculinity mean to you growing up?
Oh, you want to cut right there. I was really interested to hear what you had to say about why I'm a good example of the balanced.
Okay. Well, I'll try.
Can you? Yeah, give me. I would love to know. I would love to hear that because I feel like, Christine, this topic is something that this idea, this aspect of life, because there's masculine and feminine and everything, and masculinity as far as men goes. I think that we've had a very shallow interpretation of what that is. You know, it's not very deep. It's not very defined outside of being the protector, being the provider, you know, making the money, putting the food on the table, that type of idea. You know, making the money and perhaps even in a more, just bastardized sense, how many female partners one has had. You know, that's how the masculine ideal has been twisted into that sort of a thing. But I would love to hear, because thinking about it, and you sent me the invite, and on it was the topic of conversation, masculinity. And it was a little more nuanced than that, but that's the gist, what we're here to talk about. And I was thinking about it. You know, I was thinking about that. And certainly my idea of masculinity, what that means for me in my own life as a man, as someone who most would consider an alpha male, what does that mean? What does that look like? And how has my behavior changed? Even just my psychology, really, because it begins there, like how I think about myself and my relationship with myself and the world around me, in particular women, because I think that's where we really can define the masculine essence when it is put into context with the feminine. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
So I would love to hear your idea of what did you come away with that made you feel like I was a balanced masculine man?
Okay, so some words I would use is you're calm. You are healed, or you work on your healing. I don't think anyone is completely healed.
Totally.
You're healed. You have integrity. You can be vulnerable. And I think there's a distinction between being emotional and vulnerable, because some men could be emotional, but it's not vulnerable, or it will make a woman feel like, do you got it?
Right.
Not
Unsafe.
not just do you not got me, do you got yourself?
Right.
So I feel like you can hold space for your own vulnerability. You're a good communicator. Those are some things that come to mind.
Those are good.
Thanks.
Those are good. They're really good. Super. Those are very, I would say, very important descriptors of the masculine essence in particular, as far as I've come to understand it, you know.
Okay. And capable too.
Capable,
like
that's a good one.
Yeah, and you said earlier, like the protector, that if something happened, one would feel safe with you.
Yeah. There's a few things I want to say, and I think like many men growing up, my idea of masculinity was very basic in regards to that. It mostly had to do with external success. How much money I have, what house do I have, what car do I drive, how much money am I making, do I have a partner? You know, are there women in my life who are, you know, either I'm romantically involved with or who are sort of like in my realm, caring for me, involved with me in some way? And none of that has sustained itself as being a legitimate or solid aspect of my masculinity, what that means, you know, as I've changed throughout the years. And I think that it's interesting to think about the role of men and what masculinity has been throughout the course of human history. For instance, you go back to hunter-gatherer times. There's an incredible book, Empire of the Summer Moon, which is really about the Comanches, which were this warrior tribe. And the women really ran the community. The men were responsible for going out into the wilderness, hunting bison, bringing back meat to feed the tribe, and they were also responsible for securing the boundaries of the land, so protecting. That was really their role. The women were harvesting the meat, creating the furs and using the skins for warmth for the coming winter. They were, you know, the ones who built the fire and secured the tribe and did the whole thing, you know, and that's really like, that was the dynamic, the natural dynamic that arose of, you know, the roles of men and women. And I think sometime, you know, these roles started to get dissolved or started to lose their significance throughout the Industrial Revolution, where we went to work, and then as civilization arose and we became more secure and more comfortable, and we didn't have to necessarily protect our boundaries, and we're more access, there's more abundant food sources, etc. And then like up until probably the 50s, it was a very like men at work, women in the home, caring for the children. And then really then through the emergence of this materialist culture, I think there started to become this breakdown, this perversion in the masculine, the male and the female roles, if that makes sense. You know, I think my dad's generation, my father's generation of men were the first group of men that started to become more involved with the family. Like before them, it was like dad goes out to work, he's home, nights and on the weekends. You don't mess with dad. You give dad his space. The children didn't really come around the father. And there was a little bit of this loss of the emotional connection with the father. And the women were just stay-at-home mothers, basically handling the needs and the necessities of the home and the children. But this idea of speaking in specific terms of masculinity, I don't know if is this making sense?
Yeah.
Or I'm just trying to, because for me it helps to go to the origin. We're at this time in 2023. We have so much access. There's so much information. There's so much opportunity. It's really this super vast landscape of what we can do, what's acceptable, breaking free of all sorts of molds. So it can be confusing and difficult to find your way through the maze of like, okay, what is masculinity now in this day and age? I don't have to be out hunting the bison. I don't have to be, protecting the boundaries of my village, raiding, pillaging, killing off enemies, all of that stuff. So, okay, I did the money-making thing. My life's dream from the time I was 8 years old was to play in the NFL. I did that. I made more money than anyone in my family had ever made. I had all the access. I had all the material success I could have ever dreamed of. And I was a shell of myself because I was just, there was this God-sized hole inside of me was still not full. So it wasn't about that. And I would say I wreaked a lot of havoc in my life during that time because I was just I wasn't mindful at all. There was no calm. There was no center. It was just like this tornado of chaos blasting through the world, seeking and gathering as much material gratification as I could get my hands on. Really through having a family, having a daughter. Having my daughter was one of the biggest shifts in my life, as far as just, and a lot of my sense of masculinity stems from my relationship with my mother. And, that calm and that peace you talk about, for a long time, I sought to fill this hole in my heart with connections with women, and feeling as though I needed to secure the love of a woman to fill the hole in my heart. And that really had to do with growing up in a household that was very chaotic, very much affected by alcoholism. My parents got divorced when I was 7. Both of my parents struggled with their own things as human beings do. And the result of that for me was, I can say this about my mom because we have such our relationship, I could never have imagined how just beautiful and loving and connected our relationship has become. Could have never imagined that in a million years. During my childhood, my mother was very emotionally unavailable. And that was just, she was dealing with a lot of shit at that time, and God bless her. I mean, she's the reason I am who I am. She's she was really the one in our family who broke the chain of mental illness and got herself sober and has been sober 40 plus years and really has made her life this journey of self-study, self-acceptance, reconciliation, healing. And it allowed me the opportunity to do that with my, in my own life. And so, really healing my mother wound, which I think many people in general suffer from in one way or another. Healing, being able to take the time, which was really done through yoga, my practice of yoga, combined with a pretty steady dose of psilocybin and other plant medicines, But for about a year, my practice was take somewhat higher than a microdose of psilocybin and go into that hot room and do that yoga, 5-6 days a week. And it literally changed me from the inside out, because I'd be laying there on the floor and all of these things would be moving through me, especially if there was a female teacher, and it would be like, oh, wow, I crave attention from women. Oh, wow, that goes back to my childhood when I felt like my mother was never able to give me the love and attention that I desired. Oh, wow. And just like letting go of this stuff little by little. And, being able to do that and really transform my relationship with women in general from, I can't tell you how many guys I come into contact with who have said that throughout their life, like their desire for women has been so intense that it's almost distracting, and then you live in this society where, we have absurdly easy access to pornography and, all of these things, and not watching porn for me, stopping watching porn was a massive shift for me as well. And it just shifts, because I don't have to tell you, I'm no scientist. You can look it up, the effects of pornography on the brain. It's disastrous, and as a young man in this world, this modern civilization where we spend so much time in this phone, doing things like that are paramount for our mental well-being, for ourselves and for the world around us. So being able to really transform my relationship with women was really the beginning of starting to understand what masculinity was all about. And I've met with like every single psychic, astrologer that I've ever met with, numerologists, are like, Eb, you're in this alpha male body. However, you have this feminine spirit inside of you, which is an interesting mix. And I suppose that has to do with, for me, the only way has ever been to share and to speak what's going on in here, and I can't fake it. Like if I'm in turmoil inside, you're going to know it. And I'm trying to hide it. It's never going to happen, Yeah. And it's one of the reasons why I've had to make my life this practice of getting centered and making my life a practice of self-study through meditation, breath work, yoga, the various plant medicine that I've used throughout my adulthood.
Did you ever have a conversation with your mom?
Yes, many.
Okay.
Many.
What was the first breakthrough conversation that you had with her regarding your needs not being met as a boy?
My mom and I have such a profound relationship that I can't exactly pinpoint it, because we've probably had these conversations a handful of times along the way, and we've been through a lot together, my mom, my brother, and I. And it's been really miraculous to be witness to the changing of our relationship, which went from maybe the first time that conversation happened, there was a little bit of defense, a little bit of not being able to receive it, which gradually moved into, I think the last time we talked about it was at the dining room table, and it was maybe after a yoga class. And I was just sitting there and I started sharing with her about that, just that revelation inside of me. And it wasn't because I was in a place where there was no blame. I had totally forgiven her. I'd forgiven myself. And so I was able to share with her this revelation of how my relationship with women has changed due to me healing this wound that, first of all, acknowledging and recognizing this wound that I had. And I recognized that it was linked back to my childhood with her and me understanding where she's at. There's been a lot of that too, especially as a father. And this last year went through a divorce of my own, and it was really this, thank God. I mean, God bless my ex-wife. She's an incredible mother, and she's a great person, and we moved through it in a way that was unfathomable to me, given that when my parents went through a divorce, it was, blood and chaos and just a mess, And not literally. They were never physically violent, but there was a lot of energetic violence in that, and chaos during that time. So to go through that and to have this experience of being a single father and, my interactions with my daughter, it's really informed a lot of my understanding of what my mom and my dad were going through during that time, And so being able to relate with her and say like, Mom, I love you and I forgive you, and sharing it with her as my own revelation, completely separate from her. And we had an opportunity to just connect in that, because that's one of the beautiful parts about my relationship with my mom is just like, she's a master body worker, healer, intuitive yoga therapist she's the most powerful healer I've ever come into contact with. Just her sense of the body. I mean, this goes back decades. When I was just starting out in my football career and my back would go out, she'd get me on the floor, put me into a certain position, and get me out of pain in seconds. She's just like that. She has that understanding of the anatomy and the physiology. And so, we really speak the same language when it comes to that. So me being able to share with her a revelation that I had about my own mechanisms and how it relates to her and my experience with her as a young boy. There was just so much, like that deepened our relationship so much to be able to share that with her. Because I think for many men in particular, there is this hero's journey. And because we live in a society where there aren't any rites of passage, and there's not much ceremony and ritual, we don't know. The hero's journey becomes just like this spear into the void, throwing this spear into the void of like seeking and conquering and destroying, and it becomes super misguided,
Yeah.
And so while we have that naturally, primally, instinctually built into our DNA, we just don't know what to do with it. So it becomes this seeking out of the money, seeking out of the women, seeking out of the material, etc. And we just we're not even sure where we're going with it. It's just like, okay, I can get into finance, I can get into real estate, I can get into pro sports, I can get into this or that, and I can make a lot of money, be really good at it. But then how are your relationships actually? Mm-hmm. Because that's the true tell, I mean, that's one of my biggest things right now is, Christine, is how am I showing up in my relationships?
Quality of your life is the quality of your relationships. And I like to think, when I'm on my deathbed, what am I going to be thinking about? And it's all my relationships, all the people I care about, my impact on them. How did I show up? That's the only thing I'm going to be thinking about.
Of course. You're not going to think about how much money you have or the Ferrari in the garage. You know,
You're not taking any of that with you. No one cares. No one cares.
Like, who's showing up to your bedside and saying, I love you so much. Thank you for being on this journey with me.
Yeah.
You know?
Absolutely.
A really important book I read was called Way of the Superior Man by David Data. You read it?
That book.
Yeah.
And you know what's funny is I liked that book of his better than he wrote one for women as well.
Oh, interesting.
But the tone was different. It was more feminine, so more flowery. And maybe because I have some masculinity in me, I respond better to just direct and clear.
Interesting.
So I loved that book.
Interesting. Yeah, I think it's a great book. That was a really good book for me to read. And it really started this, it planted the seed of this idea of as the masculine in the world, the masculine essence is really that of the mountain. Or he depicts it as the rock solid cliffs that are leading into the ocean. And the feminine is just like the wild ocean. It's the wild creative energy it's wild and it's magnificent and it's vast and it's eternal and it's just like does what it will.
Yeah.
But the masculine is really about being the mountain, being rock solid, being unshakable, being unmovable, you know, and going back to your descriptions of me. I'm calm, I'm centered, all of those things. I'm like, great. I love that that's coming across. And if you've ever seen a child being born, the birthing process, which is like, that's a transformative experience in and of itself. You know, watching my daughter being born, you know, first of all, when you witness to that, you're like, there's no more incredible being in the universe than the woman, the mother. It's like, I don't even know what to say. That's witnessing a miracle when you see a child being born. The other thing that's really profound about it is, you know, watching a child come out of their mother's womb. The womb is this infinite void. It's like the universe inside of there. And when you think about that as the feminine being this, the formless, the void, it's the infinite expanse of space. And then the masculine is the form. It brings the structure, you know, it's the spear going into the void. It's that sort of yin and yang, you know, it's the opposite of the infinite void. It's this, so the feminine is this infinite expanse of space and possibility and creation, and the masculine is the structure, it's the form, it's the mountain that holds the space, holds the container of the infinite everything, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
So when you think about that as a man, the stiller I get, the quieter I get, the more calm I get. I think it's really interesting. I notice when men are very reactionary, and it looks wrong. It looks unfortunate, you know, because you go, there's a man who's not solid. He's very shakeable. Yeah. You know, something occurs and he's in a reactionary mode. He has no capability of responding. And to me, that's really, as the mountain, as the form in the universe, as the form in our relationships, you know, it's really our duty in this stage to be able to create that container for the wild feminine to do what she may. You know, and part of that is creating a strong structure where, because some people might hear that and they go, oh, well, so you just become a doormat, or you just become like, you get walked all over by women. No, that's not at all what it is. In fact, it's the opposite. You create such a strong, sturdy, founded container that the feminine feels free to be herself and able to move and dance and do what she will and respecting you.
Yes.
Which is really the big thing. I had one of my great teachers, he told me, at the center of it all, men want to be respected and women want to feel cherished. I thought that was really dead on for me in my experience of what I've experienced in relationships in particular. Like, yes, I want to feel loved. However, we have to first, the idea of being loved by someone else is really, that's another trap of modern civilization, really Western ideology, where we are seeking the love outside of ourselves. Mm-hmm. Because until we love ourselves on the inside, we're never going to be able to come into contact with someone else who can love us.
Yeah.
And that was
in a healthy way.
In a healthy way. That was really a big revelation for me with my parents in particular, and that going back to that, healing that mother wound. Because what does that even look like as far as being loved correctly? If I'm looking for someone else to love me the right way, how could I ever expect anyone to do that if I'm not doing that for myself on the inside and just knowing that first and foremost for myself? It's an interesting thing.
Absolutely.
Is this making sense?
Totally. And I know what you're talking about because I went on that journey, my own healing journey of healing myself, the self-awareness of like, why do I keep choosing a particular type of man? For me, he was emotionally unavailable. I was like, why?
I understand.
Yes. Like, why does that feel familiar to me? Mm-hmm. And so it was a good, I'd say like 5-6 years of me doing the work and getting more clear, choosing better, loving who I am, embracing the parts of me. Like, I'm a businesswoman. There are parts of me that are masculine, but I like that.
Sure.
I like that. And, not everyone likes that, and that's okay. And the more I became more comfortable with who I was, embracing who I was, that's when I started to date better. And shortly after I met my husband, like, it's actually really easy once it clicks.
Yeah.
But when you're going through it,
yeah,
it can feel so challenging, which is why I wrote an entire book about it. It's called Show Up, Finding Love for Independent Women.
Christine, I got to read it.
Yeah, and it's because this is a conversation to be had, especially with women now. We also feel lost, because women can make their own money now. As of the early 1970s, we can have our own credit card without a husband signing off on it. That's not that long ago.
Yeah, it's really not.
We can, pursue education, and women now are very capable.
1,000%.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, everyone can take care of themselves now, right? 99% of people don't need someone to do something for them. I think where the value is in romantic relationships is the masculine feminine dynamic, the polarity. That is where the value is. So I love that we're having this conversation.
Me too.
It's a constant dance too, because my husband, one of my favorite things about him is he is the mountain. He's grounded, and I purposely looked for that. I said, I want to be the crazy one in this relationship. I've dated guys who were very emotional and didn't have it. And not to say you can't have your emotions, but I didn't want to be the one having to reel them back in all the time.
Yeah.
I wanted to be in my feminine when it came to that. And my husband, Pete, is just he's like a rock. And I love that I can just be me.
Well,
so simple.
I love that. No, I love that. It's simple, yet we don't learn any of this shit. No. We have no idea.
No.
And it's funny. We always laugh about relationships in movies or television, and they're so toxic.
It is.
And the greatest love stories of all time are like the most toxic relationships in the history of the world,
Absolutely. And you don't realize what a big impact it makes on your growing up, on your
course.
perception of it, right?
Of course. I'm curious what you would say about how did that make you feel to be in relationships with men who were emotionally unaware or unstable? I don't want to use unstable necessarily because, that might make it sound like, I don't know, there might be mental illness, but not that. But just like emotionally unaware or emotionally not grounded. How does that make you feel as a woman?
Now, disgusted. I'm just no, that's not what I'm looking for. But when I did date men like that, I was younger, so I found it exciting.
Yeah.
A lot of passion. It's like a roller coaster ride, right? And I think when you're younger, maybe you crave that more instead of some people can say like a healthy relationship feels boring, right? Because they don't get whipped around.
Right.
And after a certain point, I'm like, I don't want to be whipped around. And also with my own healing journey too, that after a while, I'm like, I am not attracted to this type of man anymore.
Yeah.
And I think there's a feeling of, it can also just feel unsafe too. And also almost like I'm the guy in this relationship. I'm the one that has.
You have to make the decisions. You have to create the structure.
I have to calm him down.
Right.
And almost like sometimes it feels like it's a little kid. And all of us have the little kid inside us.
Well, that's really what it is. It's a little boy. It's not a man.
Right.
And hey, I have to say, I'm speaking from knowing that because that's how I was. I was not grounded. I was a fucking mess for a long time. It took me a long time to get here.
Yeah.
But it was a conscious effort, and I put a lot of fucking time and work in every day, in fact, into getting calm. Because for me, it was really, my thinking became unmanageable. How my life was going had become totally unmanageable. I was literally driving myself insane. And so I hit rock bottom, which culminated in a phone call where it was 2 years out of the NFL. I'm getting on the freeway to drive to this CBD company I had started. And I'm screaming into the phone at my wife saying, I'm going to kill myself or I'm going to kill somebody. That's where I got to. And it was like, there's nowhere else to go. None of the escape valves are working anymore. 2 hours in the gym, all the weed I could smoke, alcohol, there was nothing was working anymore. So I had to take a look at me. I had to start tuning in and looking at myself and seeing what's working and what's really not working here.
You had said before that when you were in the NFL, that was your release for rage.
Mm-hmm.
Now that you're not playing in the NFL anymore and you've done healing, but I'm sure all sorts of emotions still come up. What do you do now to release any anger or rage?
I just love it and accept it. Whereas, I played football until there was no more rage, no more of that rage left.
Okay.
I remember my last season in Chicago. And I'm sitting there towards the end of the year in the film room, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm in pain from the top of my head to my big toes. I got to pop pills to, just sit there and not suffer because I'm in so much pain. And I remember thinking, what am I doing here? What am I doing here? And watching the film, watching myself go up against this defensive end in practice, and I'm watching the film and I'm going, man, I used to want to kill that guy. And I have none of that left in me. I don't want to kill that guy. I actually like that guy. That guy's my friend, And the moment I had that thought, I knew. I was like, yeah, we're done. We can't be here anymore. Because you can't play that game at that level and have one foot in the door. For me, my rage was the thing that made me the player that I was. I was always the most violent player on the field. That's what got me to the NFL. You know, on film, I'm the offensive lineman running 60 yards down the field with the running back, you know, getting blocks downfield and, you know, doing everything I could, gassing myself out. And so that was completely gone. So 1,000%, things still arise, you know, anger after 7 years of a daily meditation practice and, you know, a heavy yoga practice and breath work and all the stuff and centering myself and learning about who I am and reconciliation and all of that. Thich Nhat Hanh uses that word reconciliation, which I really like, because for me, it's very much been about coming to terms with myself. That's what this journey has been.
Okay.
You know, coming to terms with who I am. Because when we come to terms, then we find forgiveness. And really, we're looking to find forgiveness for ourselves first, and then we can find forgiveness for other people. So a lot of coming to terms and reconciling. And yes, I mean, I come into contact with situations and people all the time where I feel the entire spectrum of human emotions: anger, rage, sadness, grief, frustration, annoyance, anxiety, all the stuff. And for me, the only thing that has revealed itself to be the ultimate medicine that works time in, time out, and changes my relationship to all of those sensations has been to come into love and acceptance of it all. You know, whatever comes up inside of me, rather than going, fuck no, oh my God, I can't experience that. I got to run the other way. Let me get out of here. What do I got to do? I can't feel that. I'm too, at one point it was, I'm too spiritual to be angry. None of that stuff does anything to quell the flame, to quell the fire, to calm the anxiety, to cool the anger. None of that does any of that. In fact, it actually exacerbates it and inflames that feeling. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's really been about learning how anger comes to the door. I meet it with love and acceptance. And just say, that's me too. Okay. And usually what I find, every time, what I find is when I can meet that anger or rage with a loving embrace, which means literally visualizing in my mind myself in a rage coming through a door, I meet myself with love. Literally view myself giving myself a hug and saying, I love you, I see you, dude. Yes, it's totally understandable and acceptable that you're in a rage. However, that is not going to serve us in making the proper decision, taking the proper action here that serves the highest good. And when I'm able to do that, and it's quicker and quicker, and it's a practice, and sometimes it looks like shit, and sometimes it happens much easier and smoother than other times. But every time when I take my angry self, move him out of the doorway, standing right behind him is that little 7-year-old boy, that little 7-year-old Eb, who's scared, who needs help, who needs attention. And I can greet that little 7-year-old self and I could say, hey, dude, I got you. I love you. We're going to be okay, you know? And that's just a transformative thing. And it's not a fucking quick fix, you know? We live in this world where we want the magic pill for all of our ills. And the only way to make lasting change is to practice every day. It's a practice every day. You come into contact with this stuff every day. I say this all the time. I did a podcast yesterday and I say it, and it's true. It's just a truth of being a human being. You know, monks who live in temples in the Himalayan mountains who meditate 18 hours a day, they're still feeling things. Mm-hmm. They're still experiencing anger and sadness. It's just their relationship to it is radically different than our own because they've created this space. So they witness it and they don't do anything about it, which is really, it's an art to be able to do that, to be able to experience sensations and then not react out of that thing because you're overcome by the sensation. And then you do the rash thing, you say the word, the cutting remark, you do the action that's retaliation. There's a million things that we do out of being overwhelmed by our feelings. And none of it we have to do. None of it's preordained. However, when you're functioning on certain programming that's been put in when you were unconscious from the time you were a little kid, all of the stuff you've seen, how to relate to people, how to be in a relationship, how to act when we do this. I come from this family where a big underlying belief is we go to war to solve problems, and that doesn't really serve you. If you're looking to cultivate a life of peace and love and ease and grace and alignment, it doesn't really serve you. It doesn't serve you to burn bridges. And that really comes down to our belief matrix, how we view the world. What's our perception of our reality? What does that look like? And that will dictate when you come into contact with things that don't agree with your perception of how it's supposed to be, which is really all laced in with your ego, your identity, your ego as your identity, not ego in a negative way, but just your ego as your persona of who you are in terms of yourself and your relationship to who you are and how you think you have to be, and the person that you feel you have to show up as when you go out into the world. And so things happen all the time that challenge that perception, and so when that happens, we're functioning on the programming that is there, which has really been implemented throughout our lives without us even really knowing it, because we're just constantly
autopilot.
Yeah, we're just constantly absorbing this stuff. So when you start to peel back those layers and you start to heal the wounds and you start to do the work, and the work is really just, what do we say about the work? The work is really just about, it takes practices, because you can't really say how you're going to be in a relationship until you come into the relationship and someone says the thing that triggers you, you go, oh, whoa, that's there. Okay. Oh, shoot, that made me feel like this. You can't really do that if you're not involved in life, you know? So that's why like plant medicine and the hot yoga and meditation and breath work, all these practices are so valuable because they are disciplines that take us into the subconscious and hit those triggers in a way that provides us with an opportunity that we get to look at it, acknowledge it, and accept it. And then we get to unravel it so that we can rewrite the code, as it were. And this podcast I did yesterday, this woman said this really incredible thing. Shout out Kelsey of the Brass and Unity podcast. She said that we have a responsibility to heal ourselves, because otherwise we walk around life bleeding on people who didn't cut us, and that really hit, because that's really what it is, You're in a relationship with a person and something comes up and you're triggered, you react, you yell, you say the cutting remark, whatever it is, and really it had nothing to do with the person. It has to do with this thing that happened to you when you were 10.
Yeah.
And it's still there, and every time you come into contact with a situation that is X, it brings you right back to being an 8-year-old who's scared and, doesn't feel safe and needs attention,
Yeah, and the people on the receiving end don't deserve that.
Exactly. Exactly. So I don't know how we started talking about that, but it's a daily practice, you know, and as a man, I think for everyone, it's vitally important to have certain disciplines for yourself that keep you grounded. Like for me, my morning routine it's everything. It sets the tone for my day. You know, I wake up, I have a big glass of water, I meditate for 20 minutes, I do breath work, I stretch, and then I'm moving into my day. But that meditation, that stretch, or the meditation and the breath work, and that moment to just get into my body, get grounded in my feet, it's invaluable for me to be able to show up the best I can, as present as I can in my day.
Can we talk about something?
Sure.
Can we talk about lust and infidelity?
Okay. Yeah.
So my teenage years, I spent living with my dad. We have a great relationship. I have a lot of guy friends. And, you know, a lot of men, I think they view sex as a pleasurable activity to do. And that's it. Mm-hmm. Right? And then so with lust, cheating, infidelity, for me, because integrity is one of my core values. Okay. And I have come to accept that not everyone has that. However, I'm like, okay, bachelor parties and stuff, you know, they're just like, it's just fun. It doesn't mean anything. Go back to their family.
That's what we trick ourselves into thinking.
That's what they think, right? But I'm like, dude, you don't get to have this, like a loving marriage and family here and do what you want. Like have your cake and eat it too. If you want to go fuck around, go ahead, do it. But don't be married then. Mm-hmm. Like you have someone who's so devoted to you.
Yeah.
You know, and like from the receiving end, I've been cheated on before. I'm like, how selfish is that? But as I did more work, I learned to have more compassion. I actually felt kind of sad for the guy in the end, but that he just didn't have the courage to even, everyone's human, okay? If you fuck up, you fuck up.
No, just be real, Christine, because that's all real, what you're saying.
Yeah, like if you fuck up, you fuck up. And be able to own up to your mistakes. I have way more respect for that instead of lying, you know? And so when I see men who do that, I just like, dude. So I would love to hear it from your point of view, because maybe you could understand more because you have a male brain. Mm-hmm. And with guys too, like maybe if they don't do it, their buddies do it, you know? And it makes me uncomfortable. I'm just like, why do you hang out with them knowing without holding him accountable for that?
Well, I'll be honest, you know, I've cheated and it's, in my opinion, it's the lowest thing you can do. It's the lowest thing you can do. And it really, it's multifaceted in that, you know, I think as men, we're misguided and we've been fed a lot of lies as far as like, you know, what it means to be a man and female partners and the objectification of women and having a mother wound that you're unaware of and feeling empty inside and feeling as though, you know, women owe you something or you're entitled to whatever woman you want or whatever it is, you know. It is a cowardice. And I totally agree with you. It's, it is one of those things. It's like, if you want to have many female partners, then why are you going to be in a relationship, you know? And I think to some extent, you know, there's no excuse, like anything that you say about it, because it's like, it is bad programming and it is unhealed shit, and it's feeling empty inside, and it's cowardice, and it's all of these things, you know? It's the objectification of women. It's like this weirdly, you know, we live in this culture that's hypersexualized, but then sexuality is like this thing you keep in the dungeon. But then, you know, so many men in particular, and perhaps women as well, I mean, are almost addicted to pleasure, physical pleasure in this way. And then there's this underlying guilt and shame that goes along with it. And like, you can't be honest about your desires or what you want. And then you find yourself in a relationship and your eye is wandering and you're feeling like this craving, this lust for, I don't know, something new or someone else, or, you know? And, you know, for me, really, it goes back to filling that hole inside of myself, which at one point I really deemed as, you know, desiring the attention, the love, the attraction, the validation from women, which stems back to my relationship with my mother as a child, and understanding that about myself, and really transforming my relationship with women from the inside out. And all of that really has disappeared. You know, it's like, I used to think that I couldn't possibly be friends with women, and now I'm friends with a lot of women. And it's true friendship, you know, it's not like the thing I thought it was back then, which is like, yeah, but you still want to have sex with them. It's like none of that, truly, you know, and I can say that honestly because it's been a radical change for me to be able to do that. And for me, there's nothing more important than integrity, you know? Like, I've been there where I can't look myself in the eye in the mirror without coming clean about it to my partner, you know? And literally being like, we're going to come clean about it or I'm going to kill myself. Like, that's where I got to. Okay. And because that illusion of, oh, I can do it at the bachelor party and it means nothing, and then I can go and be happily married in this relationship. It's like, you know, that's in your consciousness, and it taints your relationship. And that idea of sex being this, like, you know, it's just for pleasure, it means nothing. That's complete nonsense. That's a massive sacred exchange of energy that's happening. And I've heard this thing that, I don't know if I read it or heard it or where it came from, but the people that you have, you know, physical intimacy with, their energy, I mean, you think about it, you're sharing DNA to some extent, like that stays with you for 7 years. And that's integrated into your system, you know? And so when you think about that as a man, you know, I was thinking about that as I was working my mind around this idea of masculinity. And I saw this great clip of this guy, Kevin Gates, the rapper, who's really gone through like a fucking unbelievable transformation. And he was talking about sex, and he said, you know, people might think this is totally crazy, but my idea about sex, I don't think about sex like other people think about it. And he said, sex is sacred. And he said, I pray before I have sex. Like, it's that meaningful to me in my life. And I completely agree. And when you think about it from the standpoint of, you know, this old masculine, or, you know, I don't know, whatever, I wouldn't even call it masculine because it's not really, has nothing to do with masculinity. This idea of, why do you want to have a whole bunch of meaningless sexual partners if you're just exchanging all of this energy? with this person that you're going to have nothing to do with? Doesn't make sense. Why do you want to pollute your own energy, your own physical being with the energy, the DNA, the matter of another person that is just some like one night stand or whatever it is, you know? That comes down to beyond the spiritual, mental, emotional integrity, just like integrity in yourself of what you're exposing yourself to, you know. And we live in this society that's so consumption oriented. Mm-hmm. Like, this is consumption. You're consuming this stuff. You're taking this stuff in. Mm-hmm. Food, alcohol, drugs, you know, and the sex, the lust, that's a consumption thing. You're taking this thing in. Information, you're taking this thing in, and it doesn't go away. You know, it's not just like out of sight, out of mind. You know, that's in here now. And so every time you're walking around and you're interacting with, you know, your partner, if you've cheated, it's like all of that is still here. You know, it's in this space. It's in your mind space. And there's no running away from that. Like, you can't go anywhere to get away from that. And I think it really comes down to you're not truly, there's nothing manly about that. You know, that's really a little boy thing, a little boy playing with toys. Like, you're just looking at women as toys, and you're a little boy who has no integrity, really. There's no solidity to your being if you're doing that, you know? And
I know.
And I speak from a place of having done that, and it's the sickest, lowliest thing I've ever experienced, you know? And it was really important to me to get clean on that so that I could live a life in integrity, because otherwise it wouldn't be possible. Integrity couldn't be part of the picture if I hadn't cleaned up that part of my life.
Okay. So for a man like you, Jeff, is it okay if we go a little over, like 15? Okay. For a man like you, what qualities do you look for in a partner, in a woman?
That's a good question. I would say it's a great question. Just thinking about that. I would say groundedness as well. I think it's a really powerful thing when a woman has a spiritual practice, meaning like some life practice that provides her with an opportunity to be available, emotional availability, being able to share with a person. You know, finding someone who I could be totally open and honest with and share the deepest, darkest things from my heart, fears, visions, joys, being able to just be totally emotionally open. That's incredibly important to me. I think uprightness is very attractive. Like a woman who's confident in who she is and shows up in a way where shows up in the world upright and in her power. It's a super powerful and attractive thing.
Do you find that sometimes it can be tricky that if a woman has those qualities, because I'll just speak for myself, sometimes like being feminine, but also having, like, knowing who I am, being in my power, but balancing that with my feminine energy.
Mm-hmm.
can be tricky sometimes.
Uh-huh.
I have to be very conscious of it in my marriage.
Yeah. Well, I think like yourself and many women, there's so many powerful women in my life, like women who are like you, who are like business owners and fucking go-getters and doing a lot in the world. Mm-hmm. And I think, that's the dance. And honestly, I think women are truly special beings, creatures. Like it's different, think about a mother. Like, I have the utmost respect for mothers. Just being able to be a human being and give birth and be like the ultimate life giver. It's like nothing more powerful than that. And then to be a business owner and to do all that. And I think it just, like anything, I think for men in a way, it's maybe the reversed. However, we need to be conscious of being able to dance between these aspects of ourselves. If you're choosing that type of a life, like for me, I want to cultivate relationships where I can be emotionally available and emotionally vulnerable, mm-hmm. and I can share what's going on inside of me. So for me, it's just about being conscious of, when am I in my masculine, or as a woman, when are you in your masculine and you're in mission mode, and then just having the mindfulness, the ability to switch out of that and let your guard down. Mm-hmm. I'm not telling you anything you don't know, but I think that's a real dance and a real art. There's a real art to that, especially if you choose to partake in this world in a certain way, mm-hmm. And I think that as men, I think that's a myth that an independent, driven woman is going to scare away most men. That'll only scare away those boys, which is a good thing. Because any man who's super secure in his masculinity, who's showing up, who's a go-getter, who's mission-oriented, who is the mountain, like, that's going to allow a woman who is mission-oriented and driven and lives a percentage of her life in a masculine state to let her guard down, to be safe, to be that divine feminine that she is. So it's all just like this constant dance, I think, and I think that is the key of all relationships is, and it takes a lot of trust too. It takes trust to be able to be in that. And I know I've been in relationships where there wasn't trust, mm-hmm. and I know my partner didn't feel safe to let her guard down, to let her feminine come through. She felt like she had to take care of me. She felt like, she had to be the stable decision maker, like in her masculine. Mm-hmm. And it was difficult, and I think that's really what it comes down to, is being able to have trust that, and it's just, the trust is cultivated over time through the experience of being together, through the experience of being in relationship, of like, who are you? And it's not who are you when things are good and fun and easy, but who are you when shit's going down?
Yeah.
Yes.
I usually advise people choose a partner, because anyone can show up when things are fun and great, right? Uh-huh. I'm like, choose someone who can be a partner, and how do they show up when things are sucky mm-hmm. and shitty?
Yeah.
That's all you need to know, actually. Yeah. You need to see that.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you're looking for something long-term and with depth.
That's an interesting thing, too. I don't know if I've ever had the emotional energy to just be like whimsically moving through like short-term relationships with people,
You're very mindful.
Well, yeah, and even in my least mindful phases, it just felt like a lot. Like that's a lot of energy. And once again, like these are, relationships, particularly, romantically intimate relationships, like there's a lot of energy exchange going on. And to go to be in that with, or to attempt to do that with, various partners at once is a massive energy and time drain, that you could be spending. That's super valuable. You don't get your time back.
Right.
So I don't know, for me, romantically intimate relationships, it's one of those things where it's just like, this is either something you want, and if it's not something you want, then, just keep yourself free until you find that partner that really lights you up and someone that you want to build your life with. This guy, Carnivore Aurelius on Instagram, do you follow him?
No.
He's got a lot of good stuff. He's anonymous, which is interesting. But something he talks about a lot is relationships. And he talks about celibacy a lot for men. And he's like, how did we get to this place? He does a lot of tweets about like, how did we get to this place where, a meaningless sex and, multiple partners and smoking cherry vapes is like us living a successful life. And he's like, I'm all for celibacy until you find your partner, your person that you want to build a life with. And he's like, go have the farm with and milk cows and do yoga out in the sun. But I really agree with it. I really agree with it. I think it's a massive, especially going down that road of the meaningless sex and just seeking out validation through sexual partners, which is really what it's about. It's like you don't feel worthy or like enough of a man or whatever it is. So you need to seek out that validation through these random sexual encounters, And I just really agree with that idea of, because this energy, like, it's the Kundalini energy, it's your sexual vital energy. That's that vital creative energy in our bodies. And when you're just giving that away, like you're really depleting yourself. This is life energy that you're depleting yourself of that can be super valuable in you taking actions and living a life where you're creating the life, the vision of your dreams, Yeah. So it's something to think about as a man, as a young man in particular, coming up in this modern era where there's just so many distractions. Jordan Peterson said another thing that blew my mind, which is totally true, which is like, because of social media and the internet, you can look at more naked bodies in the span of 30 seconds than someone 50 years ago might have seen in their entire lifetime.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's a really crazy thought. And it's like, how much time are we wasting spilling, leaking, dispersing that creative, vital life energy, doing things that are completely meaningless, that are not serving us in our life? And what can we use that for? And like, maybe hold on to it and cultivate it and contain it and save it, and when you come across that person who really lights you up inside, like that's when you can say, yeah, let's try being in a relationship. I'm interested in building a life with you. I think that's much more special than the random, meaningless, like intimate relationships, sexual encounters,
All right. To close out, for any man, who would like to get started on an introspection journey to self-awareness, and maybe some of them are listening and just realizing, like, I do have a mother wound. What would you recommend? How can they get started? Because they probably listen to this and be like, now what do I do? So what can they do?
There's a lot of interesting things going on with men's groups. I think that can be really valuable. Get around other men who are tuning into this, who are coming into awareness of their own sort of masculinity and sense of it. I would say pick up some sort of discipline that challenges you in a way where you have to have a confrontation or an experience of yourself. And that might be hot yoga or a 12-step program, some sort of like, you can do it through movement. You can do it through talk therapy, which is what 12-step is, essentially therapy with a therapist, although that can be a little bit.
You have to find the right therapist.
Yeah, you need the right therapist, and it's really on you. It's about how much are you willing to share? Are you willing to be honest?
Yes.
About where you're at, or are you just staying on the surface all the time? Plant medicine can be very helpful. Meditation is super helpful. Breath work. I would say just you start this by going in, because you don't really know. You start by going in. What are the practices that take us in so that we can start to develop this relationship with ourselves? And for me, hot yoga, Bikram in particular, is the style of yoga I take and I teach. And meditation, breath work, and group work has been super important for me. So I think those are good starting points. Yeah, and as far as the plant medicine goes, I think it's best to always do those with a shaman or a medicine man, a facilitator, someone who can create a little structure for you to move through whatever's going to come up in that situation, but that can be very helpful as well.
Well, I wish we had more time. I could listen to you for a long time.
Thanks, Christine.
If people would like to reach out to you or see more of your content, where can they do that?
Check me out on Instagram's my biggest thing, at EDS Britton. My website, ebenbritton.com. It's got everything. It's got links and everything, all the information about everything I've got going on. I've got a book, The Ebb and Flow, Basic Tools to Transform Your Life. It's available on Amazon. You can check out my podcast, The Ebb and Flow. Got a lot of events. When's this episode coming out?
Really soon, because I need content by next week.
Okay, next week. Well, I'm doing regular live ebb and flows, which are virtual on Zoom. We do breath work, we do yoga, a guided meditation, and then a little Q&A at the end. Those are happening bi-weekly. And then I'm doing a handful of events this year. My next Heal and Flow event will be in August 12 and 13 in Seattle, Washington.
Yes. They're fun, guys. I went to one. Ice baths. That was my first ice bath.
Amazing.
Painful. I stayed in.
Yeah, it's hard. That's some work too. Ice tubs, that's another good one. Good modality.
And then any other events? It was Washington, and then...
The end of this month, I'll be in Texas with Force of Nature at their What Good Shall I Do event. It's a regenerative farming conference. And then right after that in Mexico at Be the Wellness Bee Fest, which is a really, really amazing event. And you can find links to all the events I've got coming up on Instagram and on my website.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.